The following is a paid program by the Whitley Law Firm. Welcome to Attorneys on Call, the program that gives you free legal information from the Whitley Law Firm. Now, here's your host, Drew Smith.
And welcome, everybody. We are so glad that you're here today for this edition of Attorneys on Call. Over the next half hour, we're going to be talking about a lot of very interesting legal matters. Now, let's say you know someone or you yourself might have been injured in an automobile accident. Maybe you were hurt on the job and suffered a worker compensation claim. Or you might be in need of Social Security disability. Those are the types of things that the Whitley Law Firm really works on and helps people all across the state of North Carolina who need help in those areas. That's why we're here for the next half hour, to answer a lot of questions that you may have. And at any time, you can call the 800 number on your screen or go to WhitleyLawFirm.com and ask your questions right there. One of the attorneys will be getting back to you in quick time. In studio with us, Mr. Bob Whitley and Whitney Butcher from the Whitley Law Firm. Great to see you both today.
It's nice to be here.
Bob, this is a passion for you, representing people in North Carolina, people that need advocacy, people that have been injured on the job, people that have been hurt in car and motorcycle accidents. And you've been doing this a long time. And I've heard you talk about why you do this, but kind of help tell our viewers a little bit how you became so passionate about what you do.
Well, Drew, when I first started practicing as a young lawyer, I did a little bit of everything. I did criminal defense and divorces and title searches, as disgusting as it was to do those.
Pretty boring, huh?
But I kind of found out, it didn't take me long, that my passion was with the injury claims that I was handling. And I wasn't handling many to begin with, but I not only loved the people I was helping, I loved the law. I liked the fact that almost in every case, even if it's a fairly run-of-the-mill automobile wreck, as a trial lawyer, you have to learn a lot of things that you would not ordinarily know. For example, I've had to learn about orthopedic injuries.
Okay.
And even the more complex injuries like brain injuries and spinal injuries. And in the wreck itself, we've had to learn a lot about engineering and Newton's formula and computing speed from physical evidence. I've learned about flooring in a hospital. I had a case like that. I've had to learn so many things. And for that moment and for that time that you're working on that case, you kind of become an expert at that.
Right.
So nothing's ever boring. I am finding that as I'm now older and more experienced and I am surrounded by the best lawyers I have ever worked with before. I've got a great litigating team, and Whitney and Ann Oxner, and it's allowed me to kind of pick and choose the more complex cases that I really can get involved in.
Okay.
And I think I've heard them snickering around the halls at the law firm about my obsession once I get focused, and I just love it. We recently, Whitney and I together were involved in a real complex motorcycle wreck case. And when I say complex, we were faced almost immediately out of the gate with an engineering expert who gave the insurance company an opinion that our client was not only speeding, but was speeding more than 25 miles an hour over the speed limit. So, and that was the first information that the insurance company had on the wreck. So it became a real chore for us and a challenge because we knew that our client was not speeding. I mean, we hired our own experts who told us that, but we kind of got to know the family, and we got to know Chase, and outstanding young man, his whole life ahead of him, and I've maintained that he still has a lot of his life ahead of him. And unfortunately, he sustained a severe brain injury. But he's coming back. He's come back a long way since the wreck. I believe he's going to come all the way back.
Okay.
But he's so much better than he was before. And, you know, I talk often about our clients, and they become my heroes.
Sure.
And Chase is a little bit of my hero. But I'll tell you who the big hero is to me in Chase's case, and that's his dad. And his mom too, but I would say I dealt with his dad almost primarily, and his dad's somebody, Drew, that we hope we never get faced as parents. But his child, his 23-year-old adult child, was not going to be able to live on his own, and he had to take him back into his home after he and his wife were empty nesters. He quit his job. And his job became taking care of Chase 24/7. And he's done that for more than a year and a half. And he's made sure that Chase has kept every doctor's appointment, every therapist appointment. And I believe has had a lot to do with Chase's vast improvement. And I think he'll have a lot to do with his continued and future improvement. So I've gotten to know that family. And, you know, for lack of a better term, it just pissed me off that the insurance company was relying on this faulty expert opinion.
Is that something that typically happens in these kinds of cases that you see, where the insurance company brings in an expert that totally contradicts what your expert says? Is that?
I would say it's typical, but I would say it's not unusual.
It's not unusual. Okay. Okay. And Whitney, I know that, you know, working alongside Bob and in this firm, I've heard Bob say many times, you know, being an advocate for those people that don't have a voice, a lot of what is why he does what he does. The experts that you deal with, and when you have the capability to bring in these people to help you with these cases, how important is that for people out there that are watching that are saying, you know what, if I do need an attorney, I need to go with a firm that has access to those kinds of experts that can give me a really good shot at getting a recovery here.
Right. So having an expert is absolutely critical in a case of this magnitude. We're talking about someone who is going to need a lot of care and probably ongoing long-term care to get back to as good as he was before this wreck. But having an expert, if we wouldn't have been able to meet with experts and get an opinion in these types of cases, you know, if the only expert talking is for the insurance company, then what is the plaintiff going to say? What are they going to have to say? Because it's hard to combat computations and equations and you know, things like that. And so you have to have your own arsenal of really successful and established experts to go up against what you're inevitably going to face.
Let's come back to that in a minute, but before, I'm going to shift gears just slightly here right now, because Bob, I know that over the years of representing people in the state of North Carolina, you have a lot of great stories to tell, and I understand you're compiling those and you're actually putting a book together.
I am. I don't know. I guess I told you. I was
you did tell me
who told you that.
Absolutely,
but,
you did.
Yeah, and you know, I think Whitney and some of the other lawyers that kind of practice in my office, I probably grow weary of all of my stories, but when you practice as long as I've practiced for more than 40 years, and you know, I wasn't like an office lawyer. I mean, I didn't just sit around and do things that weren't interesting. I was in the trenches. I was in the courtrooms. I was battling good lawyers on the other side. When I was young, most all of those lawyers were older and much more experienced than I. Now, I'm usually the older one and usually have the most experience. That doesn't mean I'm going to win, because I remember as a young lawyer, I used to like to beat those older lawyers. You know, it was competitive.
Yes.
So I've kind of put together some stories of some of my cases, my clients, and try to thread throughout the book information that someone reading it would find helpful if they're faced with some of the things these clients were faced with. That is, they've been in a bad wreck, they're out of work. What do we do about that? How do we go about selecting a lawyer? Do we need to hire a lawyer? So I try to, in the book, I do address what I would call the nuts and bolts of personal injury law, but more importantly than the nuts and bolts, I just enjoy some of the stories and
meeting the people and learning.
Meeting the people, and then trying, now I'm going to have an opportunity to tell their story. And of course, without identifying them.
Right.
But hopefully we'll have that book out soon.
Good.
It'll certainly be available to anyone that wants a copy of it.
That's great. That's great.
I'll just give you a little, what do they call it, a trailer.
Okay.
The story, the book is going to be full of stories. There are two cases or trials that I've labeled. One of them is the trial from heaven. And I represented a heavenly family who lost their 16-year girl in a tragic wreck.
Wow.
But when I say it was, so it's not the case from heaven, it was horrible. But the trial was from heaven. And that everything throughout the week-long trial went in our favor. And it was, some of it was anticipated and hoped for, some of it was unanticipated.
Okay.
Then I talk in another chapter about the trial from hell. And this was a trial that I was stuck in for 4 weeks in Elizabethtown, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And it should have been about a 4 or 5 day trial. It turned out it took 4 weeks. The first judge became ill and had to remove himself, so we had a new judge. I was trying some new techniques I'd learned from David Ball, a trial counsel, and I remember, Drew, the first question I asked the jury, unlike what I had typically done, I said, ladies and gentlemen, we hear a lot of bad things about lawsuits. We hear about too many lawsuits, that lawyers are ruining our judicial system, jackpot justice, and I went on and on. And I said, I'm interested in what you guys have to say about that. So like 3 hours later, I asked my second question.
Okay.
And so the jury selection took a lot of time. We actually ran out of jurors. The sheriff was sent to Walmart.
Oh, no way.
To bring jurors in.
Jurors.
So if you're shopping at Walmart that day, you might find yourself in the courtroom. So those jurors weren't like enthusiastic about being on the jury.
You go out to pick up some shampoo at Walmart, and here's the sheriff.
And then the next week was Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And then there was a tornado.
Oh, man.
It was literally, but stay tuned. There are a lot more interesting details.
And we're going to talk a lot more about motorcycle accidents and what makes them unique and how the Whitley Law Firm can help if you're in that situation. Back with more Attorneys on Call right after this.